All right, so thank you, Ashley, so much for having us speak tonight. I'm going to let Eben start us off.
All right, well, we are Eben and Lindsey Krapfl. We've been married for about 12 years. We have 4 kids, 2 boys and 2 girls. They're ranging from 9 all the way down to 2.5. I'm a software engineer and Lynn's a stay-at-home mom. And I guess we'll just start off here. We're actually here tonight to talk to you about natural family planning, or NFP. And our experience, we first learned NFP really through our marriage prep. It was just something that we were required to do. We were getting married at Loris. It was our junior year. Good planning.
It worked out, it's fine.
So we were getting married our junior year, and Father Haugen at Loris he just kind of told us we had to do this as part of getting married. So the only thing we knew at that point about NFP was like the common misconception that it doesn't work. So we were a little hesitant, but we didn't really have any other ideas of what we wanted to use.
Yeah, I knew that I wasn't interested in taking the pill because in high school, I tested positive for a blood disorder called factor V Leiden. And that's a disorder that causes clotting. And so I knew that there was some function of the pill that might cause clotting. So I knew that was something that I didn't want to have to deal with. So we decided to give natural family planning a shot. We learned the Crate model method, and it was really beneficial just to see how effective it was and just see all the benefits that just went along with it. And it really opened our eyes. And so we had somebody ask us, there's not many teachers in the area. Would you think about teaching? And I'm like, yeah, we wanted to bring awareness about NFP to other people. So we actually switched methods to become teachers. We switched to the simple thermal method with the couple-to-couple league. And we have been volunteer teachers for the past 6 years. And so to start off, I'm going to just really give a really brief summary of like the biology and the science a little bit behind natural family planning or fertility awareness methods. So we're going to share this slide real quick. So starting off, I knew that I knew that a woman had a cycle. And like in my mind, the cycle was the menstruation that came around like once a month, and that was a woman's cycle. It wasn't until after we learned NFP that I realized there was so much more to it. So this is the graph that I saw, and once I saw this, I'm like, oh, this was eye-opening. Like there's things going on in my body that are normal and healthy, and it's part of the cycle. So a woman's cycle is broken into 3 different phases. The first phase starts with menstruation, and it's an infertile time. And then in phase 2, that's when your fertility starts up. It's when all the workings of your body start coming together, and your hormones and all the biomarkers are just all together and working and functioning and really trying to optimize your fertility. And it's all leading up to ovulation. Once ovulation ends, once ovulation happens, your fertility ends and phase 3 begins. And this is another infertile time. And so NFP is really about using those biomarkers to identify those phase boundaries. So you know when you're fertile and when you're infertile. And when I talk about biomarkers, those are your cervical mucus, which is a normal, healthy, functioning part of your body. And you have cervical mucus in the middle of your cycle. It's your basal body temperature. You are able to record your basal body temperature and really see a change in it throughout your cycle, which indicates your ovulation. You can also observe your cervix and how that moves and how it changes. And other methods also use some other things, like some of them use fertility monitor strips so that they regulate your LH levels, I believe. And all that is stuff that you can identify and chart to use to determine where you're at in your cycle. And this next slide really just kind of shows you how everything comes together and collides right around the time of ovulation. So you have 4 different hormones that are really at work in your body. There's a luteinizing hormone, the follicle stimulating hormone, and then the common ones that we hear all the time. Excuse me, I gotta hear my mouth. the common ones that we hear all the time are estrogen and progesterone. And estrogen is really important because that's the thing that signifies your cervical mucus to begin producing and really start functioning. And cervical mucus is important for sperm life. It helps it to move and to travel, and it also helps the egg to move and travel. Progesterone to help really functions with your temperature. During your fertile time, right before ovulation, your temperature actually dips, which is amazing because it does this so that sperm can survive better, because sperm survive in a lower temperature than a woman's normal body. That's why they're outside the body on the man. So it's really neat that as a woman's body, to help achieve a pregnancy, your body lowers temperature, and then progesterone at the end of your cycle causes your basal body temperature to rise back up. So women typically think of a cycle as being like 28 days. In all reality, though, that's only accurate for about 13% of women. Other than that, your cycles can vary. It can vary from time to time. What is consistent with your cycle is what's called the luteal phase, and that's the end. It's the first day of temperature rise to the end of the cycle, and it's typically around 10 to 14 days. And that's really important to know because that is a consistent number of days.
All right. So another thing, a thing that people are often concerned about with NFP is, well, it's the obvious one.
Can I pause you for one moment? So all of that stuff is really the background behind all of these methods, and what makes these methods very effective and scientifically based. They're not just counting days or throwing a miracle out there. They are scientifically backed.
Yeah, and so people are often pretty concerned about the effectiveness, though, because hey, there's that stigma out there that like NFP just doesn't work. Well, a lot of times when people think of natural family planning, they're not thinking about the scientifically backed methods that we're talking about here. A lot of times people think of like the rhythm method or the calendar method, and that is an older form of NFP, yes, and it was a pretty effective version. Because really it was based largely on a woman's cycle being
a very ineffective version.
Sorry, yes. But it was based largely on a woman's cycle being a pretty consistent number of days every cycle. And that's not the case in real life for a lot of women. So the methods that we're talking about actually do handle really well cycles that maybe aren't the same length of days. They're really tailored to each woman and to each individual cycle. You're not really doing a lot of things based on previous cycles. It's mostly based on the cycle you're in. So I'm going to share here a chart that kind of compares several methods of NFP to several forms of birth control here. Those first four are all natural family planning methods. The Billings ovulation method and the Creighton model are both mucus-only methods. The symptothermal method for the couple-to-couple lead, that's the one that we teach. And there's also the Marquette method, which I believe is a symptohormonal method. But at any rate, you'll see the method effectiveness, that first column, that's really like the how effective a particular birth control method is at preventing pregnancy under perfect conditions, perfect use case. So it's kind of like if the user does everything exactly right, this is how effective it is. Now, the more interesting column is the next one, the user effectiveness, which is how does it really work in practice? Day to day, maybe you forget to take temperatures. Maybe you forget to, don't know what your mucus observation was. Or with the pill, maybe it means you forgot to take it one day. Or maybe that means you were actually taking a medication that you didn't realize interfered with the effectiveness of the pill. And you can kind of see here that NFP stacks up really well. Like, in fact, the symptothermal method actually is better than anything else shown here. But I guess you might wonder if that's really true, well then why doesn't your doctor ever throw this out there as an option? Why aren't they ever preaching this? Well, an interesting thing is that doctors base a lot of their information and recommendations on what the CDC can tell them.
You can tell that right now with the pandemic, that they always, going towards CDC's recommendations and all that the CDC has to say. That's where they get information from.
And unfortunately, the CDC does not have very accurate numbers out there for NFP. I'm actually going to go out and show really quickly the CDC's website here. So this is their website for contraception. They have all sorts of birth control methods listed out here, IUDs, hormonal methods. So here's oral contraceptives, different oral contraceptives, even broken down by combined oral, progesterone only, then there's patch, all sorts of different things. And you can see each one of these is kind of broken down. There's a little description. And then they also have like the typical use failure rate. So about 7% of the time you will get pregnant using oral contraception, right? They also have fertility awareness-based methods, or NFP, listed down here. But they really don't have a very good number here. The range of typical use failure rates is 2 to 23%. That's a huge range. And
it's nice because at least it's a range. Previously, it wasn't until was it this February or last February? Last February that the CDC changed it, and it was just a set percentage of like 24%, and that was it. There was a big petition out there to have it changed, to have more awareness brought to fertility awareness-based methods, and thankfully they do now have a range, but it's still not super helpful.
So yeah, you can kind of just see that what it is with fertility awareness is it's just kind of a big bucket of everything else. And it's not really giving it a fair shake here. There are a lot of different ways to do this. In fact, our next little graphic here is kind of just breaking down different methods of NFP into some logical categories here. There are mucus-only methods, so where the only thing you're doing is observing cervical mucus, like the Billings ovulation method, the Creighton model, or the Family of Americas. And then there are symptothermal methods, like the one we teach, the couple-to-couple league. There are other ones out there as well. And those are where you rely on multiple observations. In our case, it's basal body temperature, cervical mucus, and the cervix itself is an optional sign. There's also symptohormonal methods where they're based on multiple symptoms, as well as usually a fertility monitor, like hormone strips. And then there also is the calendar method. That is a thing.
And they are still out there. There's a lot of apps out there that use the calendar method. So it's something that's still there, and people don't always realize that. So
as you can see, there's a very wide variety of ways of practicing NFP. So to give it, back to this 2 to 23%, that's really not very helpful. It's not giving you the whole picture.
Because 2% is really effective, but 23% is not.
Right. So again, doctors don't really want to recommend NFP because the organization that they trust to give them information, they don't properly break it down by method. And that's really just because, well, there's not a lot of money behind NFP in any form.
There's no big movement for it because there's no money behind it.
Right. So pharmaceutical companies that create new methods of birth control, they really want to push that. They want to make sure that all the facts are known, all the statistics are known about that, and they're going to make sure that they're funding things to make sure that gets out there. But with NFP, there are no big, powerful companies behind anything because, well, there's not really a way to make money with NFP. It's really kind of one-time fees usually that, well, you're empowering the person, the woman, the couple, to be able to do this for themselves.
I mean, our class that we teach, we're volunteer teachers, so we don't get paid. And the fee that's paid is just for your supplies. It's for your books. It's for your charts, your thermometers. And that's the cost of it. And then you learn all the materials and you're able to do it on your own. You don't really have to buy anything else. There's no profit behind it. And so therefore there's no money behind it and there's no big push. Luckily, there are a lot of people out there who are trying to bring this awareness, but there's not the money to get it supported. So unfortunately, it's a slow movement. Not only does birth control not have that profiting behind it, not only does NFP not have that profiting behind it, but it also differs from birth control in another way. It allows you to be really in tune with your body, which birth control doesn't do that. It's really just suppressing your body and not letting it work the way it's meant to. It's altering your body completely just to avoid your fertile time, where NFP really gets you empowered and enlightened about how your body works and how it's functioning, and to know, those 8 or so days that you are fertile each month. With using fertility awareness-based methods, you don't have to worry about side effects that you might have to worry about when you're on birth control. You don't have to worry about depression or blood clots or future fertility issues or low libido. And for me, it was really important that I don't have to worry about what we're using acting as an abortifacient. Now, if you didn't know that the birth control could act like an abortifacient, I'd be happy to share more about that, but it does take more time to explain, and we don't really have that today. So we're gonna share a link in the chat so that you can kind of read an article that explains how birth control acts as an abortifacient. With NFP, you are constantly in control. You know when you have sloppy charts or when you're kind of slacking on your job. And you also can use that and plan accordingly. So if we are trying to avoid a pregnancy, we act much more conservative when we know we had a sloppy chart where we missed temperatures and we're not quite sure where we're at. And that's something that doesn't happen if you're on the pill. You don't realize that, oh, hey, this medication that I was taking, it interfered with the effectiveness until afterwards. And you're like, oh, I'm pregnant. Whereas with NFP, if you become pregnant, it was like, yeah, we kind of bent the rules that night. It turned out, yeah, we were bending the rules. We knew that. But the night that it occurred, we probably had a conversation being like, hey, we're bending the rules. Like, we're stretching this a little bit. We're pushing the boundaries. Is this something that we don't really mind if we're doing? Or is it this not a time for a baby right now and something we need to wait on? And it's something that we get to talk about for ourselves. But also, like, just the ability to abstain, which sounds really strange to have an ability to abstain, but a reason to abstain when you're avoiding pregnancy is actually a hidden benefit because it really keeps your relationship fresh. It's kind of like Lent. If you give up for chocolate for 40 days, it tastes really good at Easter. And that's kind of the same way it is. When you abstain for that short amount of time during your cycle, it makes the anticipation and just that love for each other so much more better when you're able to have sex again. And like when you want to avoid a pregnancy, you have that time. And if you are avoiding, there's a time that you have to physically restrain yourself, I guess. But you find ways to show your love in non-physical ways because you know that already. And that's something that's really special and really overlooked, I would think.
Yeah. And a big difference to me between NFP and birth control is that with a lot of the major methods of NFP, they really emphasize the teamwork aspect because your fertility is not like mine or hers, it's ours as a couple. So it makes sure that the family planning is not like entirely one person's responsibility or the other. Like, you didn't take the pill, what?
You didn't cover up. Huh?
Yeah, it's more about it's a mutual discussion between us at all times. It also helps that a lot of times they try to emphasize maybe the husband does the charting. Like of course Lindsay's doing the observing, but I can help her out with that. I can be the one who actually records the chart in the app or
reminds me to take my temperature in the morning. Like, we're a team, we work together.
Right. So,
and it's not just me like saying no to sex. It's us deciding together, you know what, this isn't a night for it, but in a couple days, let's have it then. Like, right. We get to look forward to it.
It also really helps to make sure our lines of communication are always open. We're always talking about what our goals are for our family. are we ready for another baby or no? Well, then I guess we know what we need to do. Also, probably one of the coolest things about NFP is that it isn't just used to avoid pregnancy. It can actually be used to achieve a pregnancy as well. All you're doing is figuring out when your fertile window is. So that knowledge can be used both ways. And in fact, it can really help to increase your chances of getting pregnant sooner when you want to. Not that it also can help with fertility issues, but more you just know what you're doing. You know where you're aiming.
For healthy couples who are trying to achieve a pregnancy, I think the statistic is something, I don't know the exact numbers, but if a couple is trying to achieve a pregnancy, they are more likely to achieve using a natural family planning method within the first 6 months than a couple who is not using NFP within the whole year. So, I mean, that's pretty big.
And on the flip side, birth control, you have to stop months in advance, and you might have to see a doctor and make sure everything's okay, that you can actually start.
And you have to wait for your body to get back into the rhythm, which is sometimes take up to a year to happen.
Right.
All right. Now, we're going to switch gears a little bit and just kind of talk about why a lot of women are hesitant to use NFP. They say, it sounds great, it sounds wonderful, but it's too much work for me. It wouldn't work for me. And yeah, I kind of had this thought. It really isn't that much work though. It's mostly just getting into a habit. So each day you wake up and you take your temperature. Actually, now we have a wearable thermometer. So we wear that every night. It's called Temp Drop, which is awesome and helpful. But you take your temperature each day. You'll observe at each bathroom visit your mucus signs, and then you record them at the end of the day. And so during your cycle, typically every night you're kind of, since you're charting anyways, you're glancing at your chart and knowing where you're at in your cycle, and then you interpret it. But it really isn't that much work. And since it's so much emphasis on being a team, you're doing it together. And Eben helps remind me to take my thermometer. He helps interpret things so that we know that, hey, I don't know if I'm reading this right. What are your thoughts? And yeah, this is it. And it's all right there for you, so you can talk it out. And so it's not really that much work. As for being not working with your cycle, I kind of had that concern coming into it, because in high school, all my friends knew the exact day that their period was going to come, but I had no idea. I didn't know when it was going to come. And so I thought my cycles were really irregular. It wasn't until I started charting that I'm like, oh, there's this thing called a luteal phase, and that's a set number of days. And I have this set number of days, and so then I can predict my menstruation. I'm like, oh, my cycle's regular. This is amazing. So just knowing that gives you so much confidence. And you can see so much from your chart that you might not even realize that you have some health concerns until you see your chart. And some examples of that is that looking at your chart, if you have a lower than normal basal body temperature, that could indicate a thyroid issue. If you have a short luteal phase, shorter than that, 10 to 14 days, it could indicate low progesterone, which is one of the common causes of infertility. You can also, if you have migraines, you can keep track of them, and you can see if there's hormones affecting you during your cycle. So you can kind of prepare for those to occur because you know where you're at in your cycle and what's causing the migraines. And then all that stuff can be seen on your chart, and that's super powerful. Knowledge of your own body is very powerful. Now, doctors do know a ton about the human body, but by charting, you're able to know your own body and cycle extremely well. And I'm going to let Eben share a story when we realize this for ourselves, because not only do I chart, but not only do I know my body, but since we chart together, Eben knows it just as well.
Yeah, when we were trying to achieve our second pregnancy, we had been charting for a long time. We were pretty confident that she was pregnant, but it was a little early for a pregnancy test to work. They're only accurate so far in advance. And Lindsay was actually having trouble breathing one day. So we took her into the emergency room, and the first question they asked there is, are you pregnant? So we explained that we're charting and we're trying, and we're pretty sure, but it's probably a little bit early. And the nurse said, okay, well, we'll do a pregnancy test. And so she did the same test she would have done at home. And the nurse came back and said, okay, well, you're not pregnant, so let's move on and see what we can figure out. Well, that was like, it's just instantly annoying to us when we just explained it's like too early. It's actually an inconclusive test right now, but whatever. We'll just make sure we keep that in mind. And we did. We made sure that we didn't do any procedures that could have been harmful during a pregnancy, like an x-ray. And we made sure we asked about any medication, like, ooh, is that safe during pregnancy? And in the end, she was discharged, came home, and she was okay. And it was about 2 or 3 days later, Lindsay took that pregnancy test at home, and she was pregnant. And, you know, that nurse, she didn't do anything wrong. She was doing her job, and to the best of her knowledge. And for us, we had a little bit more knowledge at that time. It was incredibly powerful. We were able to protect our unborn child because we knew that, or we at least
We're aware.
Yeah, we're aware
of that possibility. Yeah. Now, there are some doctors out there that are very not supportive of NFP, but there are other doctors out there that are accepting of it and like, yeah, that's great. And then there are doctors like NAPRO doctors that are based out of a fertility awareness-based method, and they're amazing. I hope, honestly, to one day have one in the area. Right now, I think our closest is in, or I would love one in Dubuque. Right now, I think our closest is in Waterloo and Davenport, I think. So Natural
procreative technology.
Thank you. Works with the Creighton model method. And the amazing thing about them is they really try to solve the underlying condition. So typically, if a woman would go into a doctor and just say that, you know, she has PCOS and heavy bleeding and cramping and it's really awful, what the doctor most likely will do is say, you know what, we'll put you on the pill. That will take care of those symptoms. And that's right. It does take care of the symptoms, but it doesn't solve the problem that's causing those symptoms. And NAPRO technology really strives to find the real solutions to those problems. So they'll use surgical or medical treatments to correct that underlying condition and really work with the woman. So they work with infertility and menstrual cramps and irregular bleeding and PCOS and all the things listed there and more that have to do with the woman's cycle. And so I really hope someday that we'll have that in the area. So that's kind of where we're at. I know it was kind of quick and we just glanced over a lot of things, and there's a lot more information out there. If you are interested in learning more, we're going to put some links in the chat, but check out the Dubuque Archdiocese website. They have a wonderful website now that has a list of all the local teachers of different methods. They explain the different methods. They have witness testimonies. Like, there's a whole wealth of information on that site. I definitely recommend checking that out. You are more than welcome to email me and ask me questions. I love awkward questions. I love to answer them. There are other online resources. I'd suggest checking out factsaboutfertility.org. They are a website, or not a website, they're an organization that is really working to enlighten medical professionals about the benefits of using NFP in their practice, or fertility awareness in their practice. And another website that has a lot of great articles is naturalwomanhood.org. Also, if you're striving to learn like an actual method, you could register for our class. We have one coming up soon. There are also other like apps that you can find. The thing about apps is really, if you find an app, look into what it's using for its algorithms. Look into the effectiveness rating of it if you can. You want to make sure that you're not using an app that's calendar based, that's just counting days, because then it's not going to be effective. I recommend, if you want an app, to find one that's connected with one of the scientifically backed methods. I know FEM has an app. Cycle Pro Go is the one that's connected to the Couple to Couple League that we teach. And there's a couple different ones that are actually affiliated with scientifically backed methods that I would recommend.
Yeah, you just really want to be careful that you know the algorithm they're using. And really for us, we use the app and we trust it, but we also are always double checking it.
Yeah.
You know, we want to make sure the app for us is really more about data entry. It's just easier to do it that way. And it is nice that it will show when your phases start and stop, but like that's something we are always checking on our own to make sure.
I personally, I would be very hesitant to use an app that just does it for me, because I want to know that I'm trusting myself and being able to interpret myself. And if I don't know what they're doing, that's just me. I don't personally enjoy that. All right. Do you guys have any questions? Ashley's mic isn't working. So. Here's one, Evan. What was your biggest challenge when using NFP?
I think I would say our biggest challenge was when we started out, we were using the Creighton method, and that is an awesome method. But the thing is with NFP, there are a lot of different flavors out there, different ways of using things. And for us, we felt like Creighton kind of stressed us out. We would have never stopped using it, by the way, and it is a great method. And for some people, it works, or it is a lot easier, actually. But for us, it was a little bit stressful. When we were asked to switch, it was actually a big relief.
It was kind of an eye-opener, because personally, I didn't know there was other methods out there. I thought Creighton was the only one. And so, but yeah, it worked with my body better. And I think that's the neat thing about NFP is like you can learn one method, and if you're like, oh, I'm not quite comfortable with this, it's just not working well for me, you can easily like switch to another method. And it doesn't take much learning because the science behind it's all the same. It's just kind of the interpreting and stuff a little bit differently.
Yeah. And in the end, I think there should be a method out there that fits you best. And that's what's awesome about it.
I mean, some people's lifestyles, if they work night shifts, then temperature taking might not be the best one for them because their nights are always kind of wonky. It kind of just depends what's best for you.
Yep. All right. Other questions?
Oh. Do you use handwritten charts or apps?
So we use Cycle Pro Go, which is the app that is affiliated with the couple leagues. So that's the app we use. And yeah, Lindsay might want to do paper charts, but I don't. It's nice because that way we can both have the app on our phone and we can enter it. It's almost always me, but hey, every once in a while, it's like Lindsay can actually enter it herself if she wants to. But it's really nice that way. Like we said, with apps, they are fantastic and they are handy, but we stress that like you should know the method.
Yeah.
You should know how to do it yourself.
You're not just relying on it to do it for you.
Entering it is awesome, but you should be able to trust in yourself, not just the app. No. It is awesome that our app does do that stuff for us, and really we're double checking all the time is what we're doing. So yeah.
Well, that's kind of it.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thanks a lot, you guys. We appreciate being asked, and
we hope you learned something. Thank you.